Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, a partner here with Dominion. We are a specialty tax and accounting firm for advisors. And on today's show, I have with me Dr. Donald Moine. He is one of the founders of the field of sales and marketing psychology. He has been working with financial advisors and top insurance agents for more than 35 years. So he's seen a lot, specializing in helping them build their businesses more quickly. And we were having an awesome conversation pre-show, and I'm really looking forward to today's episode where we're going to be talking about the power of scripts,
Mhm,
objections, questions, and resistances, and just things that
mhm,
you've seen in the field dealing with advisor practices that are trying to grow. So thanks
mhm.
for joining me today.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Tell your friends about this recording. Tell them about the podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm always like, tell me what you think. Wherever you're interacting with this, I'm only a
Mhm,
click away. But
mhm,
so there was a sentence that I wanted to start with, which is objections, questions, and resistances are always predictable. Never be
mhm,
surprised. That was something that you had messaged over, and I think
mhm,
that's a great context for the conversation. In
mhm,
your work with advisors, in your own experience in the field,
mhm.
how have you seen that manifest for people and some of the issues that you see in practices?
Well, the way I see it is that if you have been a financial planner, if you've been a insurance agent, if you've been a CPA, an estate planning attorney, for 1 or 2 years, you've probably heard almost all of the major concerns, the objections, the questions you're going to hear. They're very predictable.
Yeah.
And, uh, if you're a financial planner, people are going to say, I'm worried that I don't have enough money saved for retirement. Um, what if my money runs out? Or you will hear, the stock market's too risky. I don't want to risk my money. It's at an all-time high. PE ratios are too high. Uh, so they've got some fear dynamics you've got to deal with. Or they say, I do it myself. I've been picking stocks myself, and I'm doing better than most mutual funds. So what do you say to that? And what I have found, I was telling Catherine before our call today that since I've been working so long with financial planners, financial advisors, top insurance agents, estate planning attorneys, um, I have a lot of respect for the very important work that they do. And I was a registered investment advisor myself for a few years. Um, and yet I'm disappointed at how poorly some of these great people do in answering these predictable objections and concerns. If you're a CPA, of course, people are going to say, how can I reduce my taxes? How can I legally reduce these killer taxes? Catherine, I feel like I'm sending my money on a one-way trip to Washington, D.C. How can
Mm.
I keep some of that money in my pocket? And, y- you know, the only question is, what is the quality of your responses to these predictable objections? How can you make it better? How can you make it more powerful, more effective, more authentic, more heartfelt? And there's a whole methodology for doing that. And it largely determines how successful you're going to be. The quality of your responses determines how successful you're going to be. And Catherine and I were talking about this before the podcast started today, that one of the saddest things you ever see working as a consultant in this industry is people with all these credentials, sometimes CFPs, CLUs, CPAs, who leave the field because they can't bring in enough business. They've got all the education, they have all the right software. And let's face facts, ladies and gentlemen. Most people have access to the same products. If you're a financial advisor, if you're selling annuities, if you're selling life insurance um, policies, there's not a killer product that's going to save you. That's a fantasy that some people have, I think, earlier in their careers. Um, If it is a brand new product that no one else has, it's probably untested, and there could be danger there if if no other company has a product like that. So um, one of the things I'd like to do is just share a few ideas with you as Catherine and I go through this podcast to empower you, to open up your mind to some new ways of preparing for and delivering better presentations with your prospects and with your clients.
Yeah, so for advisors listening, what's the first step that you usually recommend they look at to improve that process?
Well, first of all, the first thing I would suggest is writing down what the objections are that you hear, the stall. And a stall is something like, hmm, sounds interesting, Catherine. I want to think about it. I'll tell you what, I'm pretty busy right now and the holidays are coming up. And then there's, the biggest holiday of the year, uh, after Christmas and after New Year's, the biggest holiday, most important thing is Super Bowl Sunday. So why don't we get together in mid-February? So how are you going to handle that? A stall where they just put you off. When I decide to do something, you'll be my man. You'll be my person. I've heard that
Mhm,
before in my career, you know, uh, and I've got some great responses to that. But so you need to, in a sense, folks, think about it this way. The objections you hear, the stalls, the resistances are kind of like your enemies. They're what separates you from becoming more successful. But they're
mhm.
also a blessing because people are telling you if you satisfy this, if you answer this question,
Yeah.
uh, uh, there's a pretty high likelihood I'm going to work with you.
Mhm,
And so, but you have to know what they are. And it amazes me because I've done a lot of role playing. I do role playing sometimes with clients if they want to really improve their skills. I don't force anyone to do anything. And, I just, that's when I can do a really clean diagnosis and I figure out where they're strong, where they're weak, how to massively and quickly improve their presentations. So you have to know what you're dealing with. And
mhm.
the first step to change, I'm a PhD psychologist, and if you spent as much time as I spent getting a PhD in psychology, one of the things you learn is that people never change anything they're not aware of. And so,
Mhm.
Catherine, you're wearing a beautiful, very beautiful shirt there. And if I did not tell you that there was a stain on it, you probably wouldn't change it. But if I told you there's a stain on your left shoulder, you might, if I told you that before the podcast, you might say, let me go change my shirt. So the first step, for those of you who are taking notes, the first step to change is awareness. You have to be aware of it. So write down what are the roadblocks that are, separating you from the success you deserve, that your
Mhm,
practice deserves. And here's the good news, folks. In most professional fields, there's only about 12 to 15 objections you're ever going to hear. Objections, questions, concerns. And when you have uh and by the way, you don't want to have just one or two canned responses. That's what beginners have. That's what amateurs have. And that's what gives scripting a bad name is that people have
mhm,
canned responses. Uh and some of them are really bad. I had a big contract with a major bank and I was training the people there selling mortgages and other, doing other uh, big bank products. And I wrote some script books for them that were very effective. But when I first got there, I would ask people, all right, now what are the things you hear? And they would say, of course, one of the ones everyone hears is, I want to think about it.
mhm,
And I said, well, what do you say when people say, I want to think about it? And the most common response was, oh, okay. Here's my card. After you've thought about it for a while, why don't you, if you want to call me, you can call me. And, I had to patiently explain to them why that was not a good response
mhm,
and give them, like 10 or 12 alternatives. So you don't want to have one or two canned responses, but you want to have, your goal should be to have like 10 or so great responses for every
mhm,
one of these predictable objections or concerns that you're going to hear, that you do hear. And why is that? Why is that? That's because people have different personalities. People
Mhm.
have different personalities. And the response that works like magic with one type of person is going to fall on deaf ears with another person. So you also have to have the skill of being able to read people's personalities very
Yes.
quickly.
Yep.
And Catherine, we can do a whole other podcast on that. I mean,
I would love to
I could
do an
give you,
episode on that. I'm like a huge
I could,
fan of personality
oh,
typing, and it's actually something that I do in my intake process with people who are interested in working with us.
yeah,
Is very early on, I'm asking
hmm
them some questions because I'm like, okay, well, what type are you? What am I work? Who am I working
hmm
with? And so instead of
yeah,
me, some people want the fire hose of all the tax information. Some people
hmm
just want to
hmm
be reassured emotionally. It just
hmm
depends on who you're talking
yeah,
to. Yeah, we should
exactly.
definitely do a follow-up on that, just on that
Yeah.
topic alone,
Yeah,
but
the analytics, the engineers, the analytics, they want all the
they want
details.
all the
But
information.
if you're working with an expressive, someone that wears bright clothing, someone who drives a sports
Mhm.
car, someone who talks with their hands, who's just that kind of person, the life of the
Yep.
party person. If you hit them with all kinds of facts, and in IRS tax code 114.472
Nope.
in accelerated depreciation, you're going to lose them. You've got to tell them
Yeah.
stories. So
Yes.
we can do that. We'll do this next year.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to have a range of response. You don't want to be a robot. You want to
No.
respond to their uniqueness and respect that. And that's one of the keys to success also. And a third thing insight I want to share with you is, folks, it's not just your words, it's how you say your words.
Mhm.
And I remember I was working not too long ago. I've done a lot of work with annuity um, superstars and people who want to be annuity superstars. Um, I helped one of my clients. He started off with about 3 agents. We scaled him up to over 120. And in his final couple years, this guy was a young guy. He's like 33 when I started working with him.
Mhm.
And over about 10 years, in his final couple years in his business, he's in his early 40s now, mid 40s. He brought in $400 million a year in commissions, not gross sales. I'm talking commissions. And then
Mhm.
he was approached by a major insurance company and bought out. Um, and his non-compete's expiring at the end of this year, so he's coming back into
Watch
the
out.
business next year. So I'm gonna be working with him again. He's contacted me. So um, it's how you say what you say. It's not
Mhm.
just the words and reading a personality. But anyway, a few weeks ago, I was working with someone else who's special, and this person was giving a presentation. I kid you not, and he said, "I'm really excited about this new product." And I was going over his presentation with him, and
Yeah.
he said, "I said everything right, Dr. Moine. I said everything right, Dr. Moine." And I said, "Let's listen back to it." And I said, "Do you sound excited?" You said, "I'm excited about this." It was like a monotone. "I'm excited about the new
It's like
product." You
Eeyore.
know, exactly. You have to, it's called congruence. If you remember, go back
Mhm.
to mathematics. Like, remember when you studied geometry and
Mhm.
congruent triangles? You have to be congruent, which means match. They have to match. Um, and I've forgotten my old geometry, but I think congruent triangles, the sides match. And in language and human communication, um, the content of your words has to match the way you say your words.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's very authentic, it's very real. But people, financial advisors and insurance agents, CPAs and state plan attorneys, folks, you guys have so much to keep in your mind that you overlook the basics, and it can kill your business. It can really slow down your business development. So if you're taking notes, make sure you write that down. Pay attention to how I'm saying what I say. I've actually had a few clients who've taken acting lessons, not to become actors or actresses, but just to learn uh, a, a range of expressing themselves.
Mm. Yeah. That's really interesting feedback. And I think a really like a, something that I've learned along the way that I think aligns
Mhm,
with what we were talking about earlier is you have to, when you're dealing with, sales and with people coming in as prospects, reaching them where they are in terms of their
mhm,
personality, how they
mhm,
process things, what's going on cognitively with them. But you have to be
mhm,
really sensitive about who you are too, because if
mhm,
you're, I think especially for advisors who are coming from a very strong technical background where you're very
mhm,
analytical, like happy
mhm.
place being Excel, you have to realize that learning how to do sales
Mhm,
and marketing, it's a completely
mhm,
different skill set than the
mhm,
technical skill. And a
mhm,
lot of a lot of the times the clients do not see our technical skill. They don't
mhm,
see all my crazy Excel sheets. They see
mhm,
the conversation that I have with them. And so
mhm,
even though I'm neurotic about making sure that that unseen effort of that Excel workbook is perfect,
mhm,
they don't see that. They see
mhm,
the, do you have a smile on your face? Are you actually happy to
mhm,
talk to me?
mhm,
Are you listening to me? Are you, are
mhm,
you here with me?
mhm,
That's what they see. And I think for a lot of technical advisors, if you come from that technician background of really
mhm,
um, analytical, that can be a
mhm,
real rug pull because you might not realize, oh,
mhm,
I actually basically have two things going on here that I'm having to deal with. It's not just making,
mhm,
they don't see what goes on in the background of the portfolio management and the, they just see the end number and the how did they feel. That's how like how a
mhm,
lot of the clients, it's their interaction with the service that we have. So it's
mhm.
really important to know where you are in that spot too. And I love that
Oh,
suggestion
yeah.
of, I've met people where I'm like, you should take acting lessons.
It can
Not to be false, but
no,
to
no,
be
yeah,
able to communicate, you know?
yeah.
Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So, we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So, if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025 that is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So, nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also, nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
Some people communicate like robots, they're just
Yeah.
kind of naturally a little bit stiff and maybe and,
Mhm.
they're good people, they're good people. Maybe your parents
Yes.
were a little reserved. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you were gonna become a librarian, it's the perfect personality. But, you have to have more flexibility when you're interacting with the public. Um, and, really what they're buying, Catherine, for all of us. This is true for all of us. We're all in
Mhm.
this together. They're buying your words because you can
Yeah.
talk about how you're so great at reducing taxes or constructing portfolios that withstand market conditions, and it just sounds like blah 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 blah. Especially the more technical jargon you use, a lot of people, even very smart people, tune out. They could be a doctor, they could be, you know, really a lawyer, they could be very intelligent, but um, they're just not into uh, some of the technical terms that we use. You start talking about portfolio rebalancing and alpha and beta, and we strive to increase alpha, and then you try to define it. And the deeper you go in, the further they tune out.
Yeah.
But most people respond to stories and metaphors and word
Yes.
pictures. They've been used for thousands of years. And so you tell them stories about how you had this high net worth client, high income client who came in. He had been to a couple of CPAs before. He was always frustrated by how much money Uncle Sam was taking and his state. And you tell them what you did for this client and how happy he and his whole family is happy now. And people remember stories much
Yes.
longer than they remember facts and figures. And if you want to, there's nothing wrong with sharing facts and figures about market performance and market recoveries, but you want to embed the facts and figures into a story. And,
Yes.
sometimes those stories are so compelling that when they go to bed at night, they've forgotten everything else, but they're laying in bed, they're looking at the ceiling, and they remember that story about how Catherine reduced this guy's tax bill by $120,000. It he told me it seemed like magic. He told Catherine it seemed like magic. Now, I want Catherine to do that for me, and that's what they remember.
Oh, yeah. No,
As,
that is
as
absolutely true.
stories. Yeah. So for those of you taking notes, write this down. Stories are some of the most powerful scripts of all.
Yes.
They've been used from the beginning of time. That's how we're raised as children. When we
Oh,
were
yes.
in the crib, when we were raised in the crib, our parents did not lecture us. They did not show us a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet. They didn't give us 10 points of good behavior, but they told us a story, and they read us bedtime stories, and that continues throughout school. Our friends, when we make friends, they tell us stories. And when you see your friend in the morning at the office, uh, typically they'll say, "Yeah, how's your day going? What'd you do last night?" And you tell them a story, or I watched this on TV, or my wife and I went out to dinner, or, you know, it's all stories, and that's what life's about, and that's how we communicate. So you need to remember that. It's just so incredibly powerful. In some of the books I've written, I've got entire chapters on, like, in one of the books I go through the seven most powerful story selling techniques, and that's a subject for a whole other
I
podcast.
know, we should do another one on story
Yeah,
because I'm a really big
yeah,
fan of Carl Jung and,
yeah.
very big fan of just, when you're working with
Joseph
people and when you're
Campbell and Joseph Campbell.
Oh, I love Joseph
You know
Campbell. Yeah,
Joseph
and
Campbell?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
the
when
hero
you're
with a
working with
thousand faces. Yeah.
exactly, and
Hmm.
that's the
Hmm.
way that our minds work, and you have to realize
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
yourself, not just for the people you're
Hmm.
trying to communicate to, but, like, what stories do you
Hmm.
tell yourself? And how are you
I
communicating
know.
with the subconscious, because it's when you're trying to
Hmm.
grow a practice, it's that two piece, right? Like, what are the stories you tell
Hmm.
clients for the
Hmm.
outcomes and results they can get? What are the stories that you tell your
Hmm.
team about
Hmm.
your mission and their place
Hmm.
in that story and
Hmm.
their dreams? And what are the stories that you tell yourself?
Hmm.
Where are you in the hero's journey? And what's
Exactly.
holding you back? And
Yeah.
it's the mind likes ideas, the mind likes
Hmm.
facts, but the mind lives on
Hmm.
story.
Yeah. It really does. And what's the story you're telling yourself about your future?
Mhm.
Uh, we're coming into a new presidency. Seems like half the country's very depressed, half the country's very excited. Maybe there's 10% that doesn't, their mind isn't made up yet. But what is this? Is it an empowering story? Is it a fearful story? Is it a preparation story? Is it a disaster story? Um, we're always telling ourselves stories, and they either empower us or they can trap us into certain, um, you know, even into certain emotional patterns, into depression or other patterns. And you have the power to break out of it. That's the most important thing to realize. You have the power to rewrite the story. We're talking about the story of your life here, which is a script. You know,
Mhm.
there are life scripts. People live according to life scripts. Sometimes they're given to you at a young age. Do you
Yeah.
ever think about this? Why did I, of all the things I could have done, why did I become an accountant? Of all the things I could have done, why did I become a psychologist? Why did I become a Fortune 500 business consultant? Why did I become a financial planner? And you have the ability to stay within what you're doing. And look at what Catherine's doing. I mean, she is a CPA, and she knows so much about psychology. We were communicating beforehand about behavioral finance, and she's into all these things that most CPAs are not into. Um, but even within financial planning, I'm on LinkedIn. By the way, folks, if you want to, let's get connected. If you like what you're hearing here, well, you know Catherine, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Dr. Donald Moine, Moine. Love to connect with you. And I'm connected to like 6,000 financial planners, about another 5 to 6,000 insurance agents, insurance company executives, a bunch of lawyers, a whole lot of great people, a bunch of company founders, entrepreneurs, and love LinkedIn. But in financial planning, I know a couple hundred people who are specializing in life planning. And so
Mhm.
they outsource things like portfolio management, very important, but they outsource it.
Yeah.
It's become, for a lot of them, it's become like a commodity service, but they
Mhm.
really help people design their lives and create the lives they want, the lives of, richness and abundance. They make sure that they're not going to have to worry about money. So they still, of course, do financial planning. Um, but, you're talking about the stories we tell ourselves, Catherine. There's also the scripts we tell ourselves, because
Mhm.
something that I find really remarkable is that we all talk to ourselves at the rate of about around 150 to 200 words per minute.
Mhm.
So even people watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, they're talking to themselves. And what did they tell themselves before watching this podcast or listening to it? Some people, they saw the title and they thought, I already know that. I'm not going to learn very much. And so maybe they're only half listening, and they're going to get a fraction of what we're sharing. And there are other people who they saw the title, they saw who's going to be on the podcast. They thought, that's fascinating. I want to learn more about that. I'm going to pay exquisite attention to that. You're taking notes. And those people, they hear the same things, yet they're going to get 10 times more than that person who had self-talk going on saying, I already know a lot about this, and who wasn't paying attention.
Mhm.
I sometimes say that the deadliest words in the English language are, I know it all. Whenever you
Mm.
say that about a subject, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's health, taxes, anything else,
Oh, yeah.
that's when
That happens a lot in
that
taxes.
that that's that's when you stop learning. Oh, I'm going to use, and they mention, some tax program. I'm going to use this tax program, or um, you, you know, my Uncle Joe, he just, HR Block just certified my Uncle Joe. I'm going to have him do it. He's been studying hard. He's up on all this stuff. Those are killer words. So we've got to pay attention to our self-talk, because it goes on all the time, and it largely determines what we're going to get out of life.
Mhm.
Um,
No, it's
and by the
very,
way,
very true.
uh, one other, I know I don't know quite how much time we have left, but just a couple of quick points I want to make is that the scripts we use determine not just how successful we're going to be in our business, but how happy we are going to be in our lives, in our marriages, because we use scripts. A script, by the way, everyone uses scripts. That's another insight I wanted to share with you guys. You can write that down. Everybody uses scripts. The only alternative to scripting is what psychologists call glossolalia.
Mhm.
Glossolalia, which is basically word salad. It's kind of like what schizophrenics speak. If you're speaking random words like up, down, carpet, wall, bookcase, computer, pen, you know, if you're speaking random words, you're not using a script. Psychologists used to think you're not using a script, but the amazing thing is they've recorded schizophrenics and others who apparently speak nonsense, or people speaking in tongues, like at certain fundamentalist churches, where they just shout out a bunch of words. God has taken me over, and praise the Lord, and rattlesnakes, and they just shout out a hope. They just but they've analyzed these, and they find there are consistent language patterns. There are consistent word patterns. In other words, scripts that they use over and over again. So a script is simply a collection of organized words. We are all using scripts, unless you're speaking nonsense. And the only question is, how powerful are your scripts? How effective are your scripts? Are they getting you what you want? How can you improve them? How can you make them better, more authentic, more honest, more heartfelt? And, you know, that's what I call the art of creating multi-million dollar sales presentations. And that's something I've specialized in for 30 years, written books about it. Uh, I've written a mastermind script book with a guy named Tom Gow, who is one of the most
Yeah,
successful
Tom's
financial
amazing.
advisors.
Yeah.
Amazing guy of the last 30, 35 years. His nickname was the $3 million man because, well, for over 30 years, Tom made between $3 and $8 million a year. And the amazing thing about it is he only worked on average 9 days a month. And he was also a CPA like Catherine. And and I wrote a mastermind script book with him where I captured all of his best responses to the most predictable objections that you ever hear as a financial advisor. And then I
Mhm.
added to that a bunch of great responses from other top financial advisors I've worked with.
Oh, that's great. So for people who are interested in learning more about your work, connecting
Mhm,
with you, obviously go connect with Dr. Moine on LinkedIn, because then
mhm,
you can get the direct regular updates. But
mhm.
where else can people interact with you or learn more about the work that you do for advisors and your
Mhm.
books and get into your
Okay.
world?
Well, you can thank you for giving me that opportunity. Um, a number of my books are on Amazon. They're very inexpensive. And so, a couple have been published by Prentice Hall. They're in some foreign languages also. And I just reissued the very first book I ever wrote, which is called Modern Persuasion Strategies: The Hidden Advantage in Selling. In the 1980s, I was a very young man and I wrote this book. It was the first book ever on neuro-linguistic programming applied to master salesmanship, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. If you're familiar with Tony Robbins, he
Mhm.
teaches his version of NLP. It was developed by two brilliant behavioral scientists, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who's a professor of linguistics. And I was very fortunate. I was blessed. I was at the University of California, Santa Cruz as an undergraduate, and Richard Bandler was a fellow student, brilliant guy, and John Grinder was a professor of linguistics. So I was around when NLP started, and I wrote the first book on NLP and master salesmanship. And we added a couple new chapters. I have a new partner, Eric Lawfolm, and we added a couple new chapters. One's on LinkedIn marketing, and that's available on Amazon. It's like $20 a copy, so you can pick that up. And also, I have a website called www.drmoine.com. I'm having it rebuilt. It's an old primitive website, but it still works. And if you're interested in the mastermind financial planners mastermind script book that I wrote with Tom Gow, um, that's available on my website. So that's some ways that we can connect. I look forward to connecting up with a number of you who are watching this.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to say thank you again for coming on. I always love this topic. It's something that
Mhm,
was a real learning journey for me, making the transition from just purely technician, tax
mhm,
professional to realizing, the real deep human scope that's involved in really running a firm the right way. that it's that it's a lot more
mhm,
than just getting the work done on time and correct, that there's a lot more
mhm,
that goes into it.
mhm,
So I appreciate this
mhm,
conversation and thank you so much for coming on. For listeners, wherever you're interacting with this online, whether it's Spotify or LinkedIn or
mhm,
YouTube or wherever it is, I'll post links below
mhm,
for how to get in touch with Dr. Moine and then some of the
mhm.
references to the books that he mentions in there for you to be able to pick up a copy and learn something new.
Thank you, Catherine. It's been a real pleasure. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, everyone. And for those of you listening, if you can leave a like, a subscribe, or even just a smiley face emoji wherever you're interacting with us, I'm interested in getting to know you as individuals. If you want to reach
Mhm,
out and start a conversation or just give me
mhm,
feedback on the
mhm,
episodes, I'm always happy to hear it. But this was another
mhm.
episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast, and we'll see you again next time.